Good day. It's Patrick Lovell truth bombing you on March 16th, which is a Thursday at approximately 10:30 a.m. my time. And at last glance, the markets appear to be rebounding slightly off the news that it looks like the central government and the Central Bank of Switzerland are going to bail out Credit Suisse, which was the now fourth bank, but this first being international and also one of the globe's systemically important financial institutions that has been up to its eyeballs and its ears and really underneath corruption and fraud for I don't know how long now. I was expecting Credit Suisse to tank, I think in it might have been September and October, and then again in November because of stuff that was happening in the derivatives markets with the UK gilts and derivatives. And again, what we're seeing, it underscores everything that I've been truth bombing to you for so long. It might be making you nauseous. It's certainly making me nauseous. The revelations of how I'm the only guy that actually has this information that's willing to share it with you because of the nature of what we see in media, which is just almost like a script, if you will. I mean, last night I literally observed, I can't tell you how many people in media that are suddenly going, do you think 10 years of easy money policies has led to, shall we say, you know, financial systems not operating with, the sort of carefulness, the thoughtfulness, the professionalism, the hedging, all of those things that are associated with financial professionals. And it's kind of funny because it's like, what are you fucking talking about? The whole thing's a goddamn casino based on late stage capitalism, which isn't capitalism, it's cronyism on the regulatory side, but more importantly, it's financial fraud, which is illegal theft by deception, which is a criminal racketeering enterprise. And governments continue and perpetually, as it looks like, it's not just the United States at the moment, are bailing out central banks that have been involved with fraud and criminality and corruption beyond the scope of anything you can possibly imagine. It's been going on for now at least 13 years. I mean, Credit Suisse literally rivals Chase, and I didn't think anybody could come close to what Chase has been doing for the last, let's call it at least reveal the things that have been revealed over the course of the last 8 years. But there you have it. And so, where are we? I made a mention on Twitter this morning that it's like, look, if you stock shelves for a living, if you turn bolts for a living, if you fly airplanes for a living, if you're a nurse and you save people's lives for a living, you don't have enough time to understand how those that work in the financial industry are doing kind of a parallel scenario where they have to operate by procedure and do things correctly because you do. And so you just expect the financial system to work the way that everybody else has to work, safely. But that's not how it goes. It's been out of control, insane corruption for at least 13 years. Now, and the full faith and credit of the United States is fueling it. And it all comes back to everything that I've been revealing to you over and over and over. And I'm going to start with and I'm not going to go long this morning because I don't have time. There's a lot of things that I've got to get going. But the most important one is to connect with millions of you. So if you're watching this, please share. Please make sure everybody that you know is starting to tap into what it is that I am. And if you have to, just kind of look beyond this, if you have interest, look beyond this truth bomb, please go to our work at www.thecon.tv. You can check out the new Untouchables with Real Progressives. That's free. You can check out all my truth bombs on YouTube and TikTok. And interestingly enough, as a sidebar, and actually, I'm glad I thought of this because it brings me to a very prescient point that a lot of you, I'm sure, will respond to. So it just came to my attention that, we'll just call it the Biden administration, has levied a threat to TikTok to make some changes because of some potential national security threats, or they're going to shut it down. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if they're referring to me by telling the truth, because I've been truth bombing on TikTok for some time and I've had over 7 million views. In fact, they shut us down for a little while, which was really frustrating. But really recently, I've become a huge fan of TikTok, and not because of my stuff, but because they feed me like my rock and roll and my punk rock and my surfing and my skiing and my dolphins and my whales and my sharks and the stuff that I love, which is like my own private magazine. And it's not just beautiful girls dancing anymore. In fact, I think they're one in like 30 sort of tweets that TikTok sort of, videos that come up on my feed because I'm really interested in extreme action sports and rock and roll and punk. And I mean, it's really cool. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the national security threat? Maybe it's me. And again, we live in a world where the lies are what have value, and everybody's lying to you, and the truth has literally no value. And yet here I am, and I'm going to truth bomb all the way until we create a tidal wave. What? How do I frame it? A populist tidal wave crusade to purge corruption. And we need millions of you. And and I didn't finish my thought about Biden because so that happened in TikTok, but when it appears, and I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, besides systemic contagion, why would the federal government, move into position so fast to backstop and guarantee the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank? Well, I heard the legendary economist Michael Hudson address this yesterday or 2 days ago, and he said, yeah, well, those are the people that donate to the Democrats and to Biden. I mean, we're talking billionaires. And, and there was one billionaire amongst them who obviously is a big Trump supporter. His name is Peter Thiel, the alternative lifestyle freaking libertarian guru who's got, his getaway, I guess, down in New Zealand, just in case the world falls apart based on the shit that he's involved with. And, but it's just a mess. And it's like, oh, really? Did Biden really move to make sure that all of the donors had their money so that they could actually pay back to the campaign as we move into the 2024 presidential campaign? Yeah, there's a thought, right? But in addition to all of this stuff, man, I could go into details about all of the fraud and how it works and everything else, but it all begins and ends. And this really got me uptight yesterday too. I happen to watch, and I like Frontline on PBS, okay? From a production level, they are as good as it gets. I mean, they're elegant, they're clean, they're professional, they're brilliant in a lot of ways, but as it comes to actually laying out what's going on, they're just polite and they infer a lot of stuff and they give you half truths and they don't tell you the whole story and they cover up certain things, which is obfuscating, which makes them contrary to what you think they are. And it's not that they do it intentionally. I think they do it to kind of protect themselves from libel. They kind of understand things, but it's so nauseating to me that, and they're part and parcel of this whole situation that I started off with, that everybody in media is like, did easy money lending or easy money, create these problems that we're in the midst of. Now, meanwhile, the question I have to ask most of you, when they talk about easy money, for example, did you see $900,000 appear in your account in 2021? Okay, if you didn't, then you're not somebody who was on the receiving end of easy money, okay? Now, when I look back at the COVID scenario and I look at the PPP loan madness and everything else that came from all sorts of fraud that took place at that time period, I do know that a lot of people, sat at home and through the personal paycheck guarantee sort of thing, were able to make money by not doing anything. So they started to invest in things like meme stocks or crypto or any number of sort of things like NFTs and everything else that were short term. And as you see, if we just do a backwind on it, just look at crypto. Crypto blew up, and that's part and parcel to why this bank out of San Diego called Silvergate Bank blew up, right? But that gives me a chance to just address crypto for a second. I mean, crypto is exactly what it sounds like. Really, the only utility of crypto was to hide money of drug launderers or international criminals, because everybody else was in the whole process. I mean, it's like you peg it to the dollar, you move money, and then you take it out as dollars because you can't exchange crypto and buy houses with everything else. And so it's just part of the system. And meanwhile, at the end, we find out that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX fancied themselves the central bank because they just kind of figured. I remember, Andrew Ross Sorkin, who I can't stand, during the Dilbert seminar, was interviewing Sam Bankman-Fried, and Sam Bankman-Fried held the line on this. He's like, could you have worked yourself out of the problem? And Sam Bankman-Fried is like, yeah, with more financing, which is inferring that, yeah, just bailouts. I just give me more money and I could do more shit and shenanigans, not shenanigans, which is criminality, that of course could keep the scheme going while he was just simply, stealing money directly from people that were investing in FTX and of course Alameda, which is just fucking ridiculous. And then you go backwards from there and you go into, the meme stock category of AMC and GameStop and everything else. A lot of that's just based on, like they kept saying, hold it to the moon and you increase the value and everything else. And then of course they were trying to break the bank, if you will, to break the buck of the mammoth, titans of hedge fund investing, but those guys operate at a different level. And of course, was it Stephen Cohen? It was Cohen, I think. Anyway, what it was, a Citadel Capital, right? I might be getting him confused with somebody else, but I think it was Citadel Capital. But in the end, they had the resources to take it all the way, and then in the end, a lot of retail investors got burned, and then don't get me started on the PPP loan fraud that got put into action like immediately. I mean, the entire economy, in the global economy at that, has been predicated on this thing for the last 13 years of the Fed providing free money, which is crack, to basically crack addicts, which is the financial system. And if you give them more and more crack and you don't really enforce guidelines, what do you think is going to happen? Well, contagion and slippery slope to madness, because they know that the federal government of the United States is going to have to backstop all these losses, and they're going to have to pivot, so-called pivot, because of course Jerome Powell's policy and the Federal Reserve for the last 16 months is basically we got to hike interest rates because they got to control inflation, right? That's the idea. And then something was going to break. Well, it looks like it's breaking. But meanwhile, going back to what I have revealed to the world is really ground zero for this nuclear explosion of fraud. Because in the 2008 great financial crisis, which never got resolved, where tens of millions of people got set up in illegal loans, liars' loans, in all sorts of manners of deceptive acts and practices, and in refinancing and all sorts of bullshit that the whole system was getting fees on. But at the same time, they were also doing derivatives because of deregulation. Deregulation that happened during the Clinton administration, not the Trump administration, the Clinton administration. And by the way, Trump was up to his eyeballs in all sorts of SNL grift with his Trump casinos back in the day, which he was doing the same version of this, but kind of just phase one of it, okay? Which led him to be able, when he said he was going to drain the swamp, he ended up putting the swamp in complete control, which is just another scenario of what took place. But the derivatives in 2008-9 blew up the world. So, $600-800 trillion of bets went fucking sideways, and it created the global contagion where the entire financial system seized up. And then the government of the United States told everybody in the world, in the grift with our media, said that what we're going to do is we're going to create the TARP program, Troubled Assets Relief Program, where the Federal Reserve is going to hoover up toxic assets. Nobody knew how those toxic assets were created. Nobody understood what that meant when the Federal Reserve did that, which is illegal under the statutes of the Federal Reserve, lending capacity of lender of last resort, and that's under the systemic rules of Federal Reserve Act 13.3. And what we did was, instead of giving $700 billion, which tamed down the markets, and there was a big controversy, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, we've never heard of that many, those kind of figures before." And of course, all the fucking idiots in Congress were playing ball, or at least not even aware of it. And then ultimately, what we ended up doing was providing these guys $29 trillion. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. Our GDP of the United States, all goods and services, like $25 trillion. I mean, the amount of money that went to the financial system is absurd. And then what did they do? To build it back, they just gave themselves bonuses. They just rolled it into stock buybacks. And then they started rolling it in all of these other places like meme stocks and everything else, because we continued it. Not anybody, I mean, all of these morons in mainstream media that are talking about, oh my God, the free money of, the last 10 years, could that be good? They're not even aware of what took place in 2019. We had a repo run because of what was happening in derivatives, again, based on SoftBank in Japan, that the Federal Reserve moved into action, and there was like $22 trillion that immediately got pumped into the financial system. So do your math. 29 trillion, which was really 30 trillion plus 22, that's $52 trillion. Then suddenly we have COVID, right? The entire economy of the globe shuts down. And then right away, the Fed pivots into action in even more emergency stimulus that goes to the financial system. They were like, oh my God, free money, what are we going to do with it? So ultimately we talk about everybody got a paycheck. That's what the media says. You probably, if you got children, you got up to what, $1,800, maybe $3,600 total, right? Did you see $900,000 in your bank account directly? Well, I've seen numbers that basically quantitative easing gave $900,000, just plugged it into the bank accounts of the top 1%. That's not mentioning the free money and the quantitative easing that Frontline, for example, didn't tell us what quantitative easing was buying. Nobody's talking about the bond purchase program, particularly mortgage-backed securities by the Federal Reserve, what was it buying? It bought liar's loans that were worth nothing, that they bought at, fucking 100% on the dollar coupon, whatever, and ultimately they never took the asset anyway. And they were all predicated on liar's loans, and all of the appraisal fees and everything else in the stopgaps that we have in our registry of deeds around the country were all freaking sabotaged through documentation fraud to the tunes of tens of millions of doc fraud. Okay, that led to millions of people getting foreclosed on illegally. So you might be like, oh, you know what? These motherfuckers, they took out loans that they couldn't afford. They didn't know what they were doing. They tanked the economy, and they should be thrown out of their fucking houses because they're idiots and they don't know how to manage their money. Okay, well, let's just take the same view of the financial system, who was underwriting these loans based on them knowing that these people couldn't afford to pay those back, and they did it because they were incentivized to, because of modern executive compensation, because of control fraud, because that's how they make their money on fees, and so then they started shorting it. Okay, it's just a duplicitous game of a big setup, but that's not all, because let's just say all the people that are fucking morons that didn't know how to manage their own, income or, and being able to finance their own matters, and they got in over the head. Okay, you want to blame them? What about the pensioners that have been working their ass off their entire career to go to retirement, that they're not managing their money, but the same money managers that are fucking everybody else on the deceptive acts and practices of the liar's loans, they're also selling the same product to short against the people that have saved their own money, lived perfect lives. I wouldn't say perfect because nobody's perfect, but you get my drift. Stable, and then they got fucked. And then what? So what? You're gonna talk out of both sides of your mouth, and you're gonna say, well, I'm not saying the same. Well, because they're all connected. Okay, that's how we got MAGA. And by the way, that's what should connect Black Lives Matter to MAGA, because everybody got targeted and destroyed. If you want to know the truth. So, but what happens in the end of the day? Well, okay, let's just say everybody's an idiot, everybody made mistakes, and everybody should go down with the ship. That was honestly my opinion back in 2008, right? I'm like, fuck, the economy went sideways, I'm getting fucking nailed, I gotta figure out a way to survive. That was the first thing that popped into my mind. But then I started pulling the threads because I was like, it didn't make sense, because I was going through the same process dealing with servicers, and I knew they were lying to me, and then all of a sudden it was like, I opened up this freaking world, and the next thing I know, 10 years later, I got all the fucking answers, and I'm like, holy shit, as I'm watching all of media basically bumble around in the dark, lying, stealing, and deceiving themselves with fucking misinformation and trying to blame everybody else. Meanwhile, there's a cause and effect of everything, because when the whole thing blew up, like I said, Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally by these fucking scumbags that basically lied to the world, backdoored it to their freaking homies in finance, that then double down, triple down, quadruple down, and then, we ended up with the Trump administration. What else would you expect? When you have a race to the gutter, you end up with the freaking king rat himself, which is Donald Trump, who's been doing this stuff his entire freaking career. And I don't care if he gets indicted for hush money payments to a porn star. On the list of, offenses that this guy's done, that's freaking tiny compared to the gazillions of fucking criminal scenarios that he's been involved with, not to mention money laundering for Russia, which was going through Deutsche Bank, which then also he's playing ball with the Saudis, who were deeply involved with 9/11. To what extent, I don't know if we'll ever know, because we buried that one, because our previous generation of corrupt motherfuckers got us into this situation. So the bottom line is we've been living in this failed state apparatus by this, this deceptive acts and practice through the diabolical scheme of the people that control the whole system. And it should have gone down the tubes in 2008 if you understand capitalism. Risk reward. You don't bail out the guys that fucked everything up illegally, which is what we did and continue to do. So until you, the regular person who's got to go to a job, maybe you're teaching children, maybe you're turning nuts, at an airplane, making sure the airplane fits. Maybe you're flying the airplane, to make everything safe. Maybe you're a cop. Maybe you're a good cop. Maybe you want the lights to work and you don't want people to speed in a child zone. There's so many good people in the United States that go to their job, that do things the right way, because the rules are you got to be safe. That's what happened. That's not what's happening in finance. And so for all of you that are thinking to yourself, well, you know what, my house that I invested in, it's worth a whole lot more, so I'm going to look the other way. Well, it's going to come down on you too, and I think it already has, at least from its highs a year ago? Look, man, it's corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to pay off the mafiocracy. And everybody's in on it. And what I'm offering you is a lifeline to And I love this line that I came up with, and I got to get this in my head because, you, me, and everybody, you see that's not a Nazi that believes in democracy and integrity and dignity and the rule of law and, safety and soundness and fairness and the dynamism that allows the geniuses of our nation to come up with solutions to big problems. That's who we are. We'll survive this, I'm sure. But a lot of people are going to feel a whole lot of pain in the process. And the point is, why? Because you don't know how it works. And so, look, I'm sorry to ask you for money, but unfortunately, the Supreme Court and the system made it such that unless you pay into a system, you're not going to be heard. And I can assure you that we can't get this truth above the noise of madness. We can't get the truth above the lies unless we have tens of millions of people that got victimized and fucking destroyed by this shit that buy in to a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption. And that's what I'm offering you. And I put $13 because I know that we can all afford $13, even if you're panhandling. But I'm not looking for people that are panhandling. What I'm looking for is just regular people that are sick and tired of this system pissing on your head, telling you it's rain, and destroying the future and sustainability. I call this the Clean New Deal. And what we have to do is I've got to get out in a barnstorming revival populist tour that through multimedia, like a Live Aid campaign, like I'm, Bob Geldof, basically, in a scenario where we give it for free, quite frankly, right? We're not charging admission to this whole thing. We want millions of people to show up in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Park. Or down in LA, maybe we do it in West LA, down in Santa Monica, New York and Washington, and maybe we wind up, quite frankly, at the National Mall with 500,000 people, where we literally just show you what the country is supposed to be, how it was framed, what it's actually supposed to do, the wars, the great things that we did to be able to create in order to form a more perfect union, while recognizing all of the things that we did wrong. Because that's the thing. Humanity has always got to struggle with itself and greed and tyrants and criminals and all sorts of bastards. That's why we have the law. If you don't have integrity, if you don't have character, and you don't know how to do things correctly, then the bad guys will frickin' run circles around you all the time. Because that's the light side and the dark side of the force. The dark side wants to go shortcuts. The light side wants to go, the fundamentals, man. And maybe if you're asking yourself, this guy sounds like a football coach. Well, because I was for a long time. I understand the fundamentals, right? And so the long and the short of it is, it's like, what would you do, Patrick, for example, even though this isn't necessarily a presidential campaign, we'll get to the right time to discuss however that may manifest, but this is a campaign to purge corruption, to build a movement, to basically just like the founding fathers. And that's why we're doing $13, because of the 13 colonies that got together to purge tyranny and create separation of powers, okay? Through the Bill of Rights and in order to form a more perfect union. But ultimately, if I were president, and I'll finish with this note, this idea. I would love to have a financial terrorism task force. And maybe they have a big water cannon as one of their weapons. And so when the CEOs come down with their armies of attorneys and they're going to their limos and they just defuck the United States, I would love to fucking have on video, basically a water cannon, basically, purge these guys down into the sewer where they belong. I'm being a little bit facetious, but you can imagine it. And the long and the short of it is, guys, imagine if we spent $30 trillion to basically reboot the United States. Do we have problems we can get over, like energy problems, like, manufacturing scenarios where we're not dependent on a global supply chain? I mean, we could come up with all sorts of answers, and it's never going to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be this freaking insane corruption that has complete control of the globe, because it's going to break, and when it breaks, they break you, and they get away with the loot. You're going to sit on your hands and let that happen? How many of you are just like, what? How pathetic are you if you would allow these bad guys to get away with what they get away with if you had the facts? What we got to do is we got to plow through this insane cloud of misinformation, disinformation that's not primarily coming from the internet, even though it is, but it's coming from mainstream media. Because what corporate, sort of advertisers are advertising on CNN and Fox and MSNBC? Really, the biggest aspects of our economy, right? Who depend on this stuff. Look, man, I would not have sat on the sidelines during slavery. I would have been an abolitionist. I wouldn't have sat on the sidelines during the American Revolution. I would have been a patriot. I am a patriot. In World War II, I wouldn't have sat on the sidelines. I would have fucking fought fascism. I mean, do I prefer a world of peace? Yeah. Do I trust humans with a lot of power? No. Do I think they're good fights? Yeah. Do I think we have to have a bloody revolution that creates a reign of terror where we cut off all these people's heads? No, because the law is still salvageable. The problem is you don't understand that the law has been complicit with finance and government through the revolving door and media to lie to you, to lie, steal, and cheat you through deception. It's diabolical deception on a monumental scale. We have to have a biblical response. I kid you not. This is the fucking pharaohs. Or, Jesus was talking about, throwing out the moneylenders to cleanse the temple because they had, they had tarnished the sanctity of the temple, which is all about character and integrity in both of those instances. And I know Muhammad, by the way, Muhammad was all against corruption, supposedly. Okay? Look, man, this story of corruption has been a part of the human experience forever. And for those of you who blame the fucking Jews, get a load of this. Did you realize that in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, that the Roman Catholic Church basically blew up during what they call the schisms because they were selling forgiveness from God to the most brutal actors about killing people and all sorts of stuff that era's, corruption, if you will. And then there was Calvin and Luther and all of these other, spinoffs of, of Christianity because the Catholic Church was corrupt. And this goes on forever. It's humanity. And the only way you can handle corruption is through arresting and purging corruption, which is what the integrity of law is supposed to do. And the final word on this whole thing. Look, I'm serious. Donald Trump is so guilty of so much, it's ridiculous, right? And the fact that many of us are listening over and over, throughout our nightly news stories, is Trump going to be indicted on, lying in some kind of campaign scenario with the hush payments to Stormy Daniels? And it's like, oh my God, man. I guess they got, the kingpin in Chicago on tax evasion. Why can't I think of his name? So there's kind of like that. But guys, Credit Suisse just emulates in Europe how fucking bad it is. All right, corruption's been insane. It's the test of our times. It's the will of our times. Because on the other side of this, we have a renaissance waiting. We could literally reboot this country to where children could be, live with their families who have opportunity and stability, and good people do good things. And, onwards and upwards.